seeing it elsewhere, I think it's better to the end. It just stops the flow of the thing. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, it's only if there's some urgent clarification we could maybe do something then. Yeah.
Sure.
Well, it's I don't think it's exactly the talk you're expecting. So there will not be tremendous detail about various telescopes. So maybe interruptions are unlikely.
Okay, we are live on YouTube, so if we want to.
Shall we start? All right, we'll give it 5 minutes then.
We've still got people joining us.
Okay, I'll leave it a minute.
Are we missing the cats tonight?
Yes, we are, Peter. They've retired to bed
upstairs.
Sorry about that.
Too hot a day for them, was it?
Yes, I know how much you love them.
Hi everyone, it's Andrew. I don't know if you can hear me, but I'll mute for the rest of the thing.
Yeah, we
Hi,
can.
Andrew.
I was just going to say, people, the first noctilucent clouds have been sighted by the satellite, I think yesterday or the day before. So they might be heading your way. They might even get my way. You never know, sometime. At the moment, there's a lot of cloud between me and you, by the look of it.
I think
need to be pretty quick, John.
The forecast seems to suggest Sunday night might be clear.
Right, well, it's sort of clear. It's sort of horrible top haze, you know, sort of 20,000 feet or whatever it is, cirrus cloud, but over most of the sky. So,
where are you, John?
I'm in Alton, just south edge of London.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, so where I observe is that noctilucent clouds is somewhere above your head, I think, from as far as I can get the geometry. About 400 or 500 miles north of me, that sort of order.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to know because the light is refracted by the atmosphere and there's no real good measure of what the refraction is. We're always hopeful. There's if people look at spaceweather.com, there's some images on there from the AIM satellite in the last couple of days where they've but they're only up by the North Pole at the moment, so I don't think they've got down far enough to observe, unfortunately, yet.
Yeah, we've had a fairly windy day here in Edinburgh today, so.
A bit like here.
Fairly is putting it rather mildly.
That's an understatement.
I was out doing trolleys for 3 hours this morning. It was very blustery, I can assure you.
Has anyone managed to see Mercury and Venus yet? I tried yesterday evening, but it was too cloudy.
Snap.
No.
As I said the other day, I need to do some serious demolishing of my neighbours' houses to see that. And they might get a bit upset.
You can always build a tower, John.
Yeah, well, that's from the upstairs top of my house. I'd have to get up somewhere by the chimneys, I think. It comes in living on the wrong side of a valley on the west side, so the land goes up west of me. So
you'll need an extension that Clive showed us on that house in Germany.
Yes.
The Morel Folly has a ring to it.
Yes. Quick, she might be listening. No.
Well, I'm afraid we'll have a lot of people to employ building follies in the new economy. It's the. I had hoped to see it yesterday evening, but there's a P&O ferry obstructing my view from one of my windows. So, Obviously, Leith was the only free port P&O could find to park their cross-channel ferries.
There's a whole lot off the south coast. You probably don't know the geometry of it, but where the Isle of Wight is, that shelters them from some of the westerly winds. So there's about 5 ferries off one end of the Isle of Wight, and a whole lot more stuck in Weymouth Bay. They seem to be all just outside the port limits. They don't have to pay the port fees. So I think the Queen Mary 2 and the Arcadia and several others are down by Weymouth. And
well, they've got two.
Okay.
They've got 2 up here, according to the maritime website. They've come up from Dover.
yes,
There's-
Okay, so sorry for the delay in starting tonight's program. 1 or 2 short technical hitches, but we're over those hopefully. Should we move on to the next slide, Mark? Welcome everybody. As I say, sorry we're a few minutes late starting. Special welcome for anybody who's not a member and joining us from YouTube. There are various ways you can get information about the talks we're running. We tend to be running them every Wednesday and Friday night at the moment. And we have a program that looks like it'll stretch to the end of July, and we'll take a view then. But you can contact us on our website. You can certainly see what's on there, on our Facebook page, on Twitter, and all these talks are available on YouTube as we give them, or if you want to follow up afterwards. Tonight, we have Horst talking about all my telescopes, which sounds interesting. And what we thought we'd do is I would start what I hope will be a series of talks by members on their equipment. And I'll run through my telescopes and just explain a bit about what they are, what's good about them, what's probably not so good about them, my experiences. Hopefully this will be useful for general interest. It'll be useful for anybody looking at changing their equipment or wanting a view about what the equipment is like. And I'll encourage any member to spend 5 minutes giving a talk. You can do it with slides, you can take a video, or you can do it live video if you wish, and we'll help you with any sort of technical issues you've got about doing that. So on that note, I'll just, I think the next slide, Mark, just coming up on Wednesday the 27th, we've got Dr. Bruce Vickery giving us speed of light and other stellar effects.
Well, it says stellar effects. That's interesting.
And we'll ignore that one, Peter. And on Friday the 29th, we're going to show for members only a Residence Above the Clouds, the film made when members of the Royal Observatory went over to Tenerife and recreated some of the work that Piazzi Smythe did. It is about getting on for 2 hours, the film. We will have a short intermission. You may want to stock up at the start of the film. And hopefully Andy Lawrence will give a short introduction and take any questions. Mark is going to be spending a bit of time putting together the introduction to astroimaging part 4, long exposures and deep skies. Problem this time of year, I don't think we've got enough time to make these long exposures, Mark, but anyway. And then going forward, we've got quite a few other talks lined up and a virtual pub quiz. Should be fun. It'll be very easy if you know the answers, very difficult if you don't. You've got due notice to mug up on a variety of facts and figures, people, and events in astronomy. And with that, I think we'll move on to the talk. So over to your screen then, Horst.
Okay. Still have to do some juggling with Zoom, I think, and I should check that my pointer is too late. Can't do that anymore. Right, start sharing. I don't know why my computer always takes 10 seconds to do this. I think I have two disappointments in this. The first is that I have just switched off my video because I have very little bandwidth upstream and my video would take up most of it. So it seems more important that you get my audio and the screen share. The second disappointment is that it's not really about telescopes, it's about amateur astronomy as such, and what I think it is. But anyway, have a look and see what you make of it. I thought I'd start with a picture of half a dozen amateur astronomers practicing social distancing. This was in 2006 in Turkey when we were waiting for the sun to disappear. So amateur astronomy, I think, well, there are different aspects to it. Some of them interest one person more than the other and so on. But I think these are perhaps the 5 components that we might be able to identify. It seems to me we pick it up as a hobby out of curiosity. We want to learn, we want to pass on knowledge perhaps, and we want to know what's going on out there. I put second, tourism. It's a low-key way perhaps to start doing some astronomy, just go and visit some place that already exists. But I think the main thing is the telescopes, the toys, you might call them equipment, when you tell your budget holder that you want to buy something. But then really it's about observing. It's not the telescope is supposed to be just a means to observing. And finally, observing might lead perhaps to some science in a very small way, probably, because we cannot do all that much. So here we are. This is Apollo 7 returning from Earth orbit in 1968, and this is the first picture probably that got me hooked on astronomy. It was black and white, and it was on the television, and it was very boring to look at the Pacific for an hour, but it felt like an hour. It probably was 10 minutes. So under knowledge, why do we do astronomy? We marvel at the wonders of the universe. We wonder what is the purpose of it all, and of us perhaps in particular. Or we are very much interested in the technology of space flight in particular, but perhaps also just the gadgets that we buy or use to to do astronomy. And to do our learning, we use books initially, probably to get some basic overall basis in astronomy, and then magazines to keep up to date, or the web. But I doubt that the web would be a good place to just get a full overview from the beginning. So anyway, knowledge. We can take it further. If you're young enough when you pick it up, then you can perhaps go to university and do astronomy properly, even for money. However, you first have to learn physics, and physicists have to learn maths. So you want to think about that, perhaps. When you do your PhD, you get a taste of real research. So here is the first picture of one of my telescopes, if you like. It's the 100-meter radio telescope in Effelsberg, where I spent many a night collecting, looking at interstellar hydrogen. Not everybody finishes their university course, and I think that is not really a problem. You still have gained something from it, or even if you do finish, you are not necessarily going to be an astronomer. You may just be, quote, just a physicist or an engineer, or like me, an IT person, or you may do astronomy by going into public engagement. So it's trying out astronomy for a young person is perhaps still a good thing to do, even if in the end they don't become an astronomer for the rest of their life. So that's it for knowledge, really. The next point I had was tourism. I think a very simple way for us to start doing a little bit of astronomy or being a little bit active is if we go somewhere on holiday, if there's a museum, a planetarium, and an observatory, why just not just go and visit it, or prehistoric sites indeed. Some of these have astronomical connections, of course. The picture shows Mills Observatory in Dundee, so even if it's just a day trip to Dundee, it's a nice park up there where you can have a walk in the woods. And if the observatory is open on the day, you can also do some astronomy at it, or have somebody else show you how they do it. But at the other end of tourism, it can take over our holidays. We might. Well, I know Sean went to America, especially for an eclipse, and I went to Turkey for an eclipse a few years earlier. So handing over our annual leave to such an event means that we can be in the right place at the right time, because if we stay at home, which we have to do now, it will take forever before we can see a total solar eclipse. Other reasons why we might want to travel just for the astronomy is we might want to see the southern sky. We might just want some clear sky, some reliable weather in Spain maybe, or someplace. Or we could just go out of the city into the countryside nearby to have a dark sky. So there we are. I think every amateur astronomer probably sooner or later will want a telescope, and with a telescope goes a mount. Without it, it's not much use. For a first telescope, I think we have come to a consensus. The first one is probably one you want to throw away after a while, because either you lose interest, or your interest becomes so strong that your telescope just isn't good enough anymore, or it was initially the choice you made was not quite the right one. So with my first telescope here, I found that the Altas mount that goes left and right and up and down was quite stiff. It was stable, more stable than this thing, but it was quite stiff, and it was quite annoying to to track objects with it. So I built this contraption instead, and although it was quite flimsy, it felt much better to use. Then for my second telescope, this is the one I bought, and I thought it would be for keeps, that I would keep it for good. It has good optics. It is a good size. Its angular resolution is slightly better than the typical seeing, but it also has, for a 2-meter focal length, it has a very short tube of these. Of course, these Schmidt-Cassegrain telescopes, it's only 60 centimeters long, so you can actually put it in a big suitcase and carry it around, and it is even weight-wise, it's not too heavy. The mount is adequate, I would now call it. At the time, it was probably quite good, but no, even at the time, you could probably have had a German mount. And it turned out that it is future-proof. You can change things and make things better on it, like strap on a camera or have an auto guider to track the stars. So indeed, I still have it. After 43 years, it's still there, but it has a different mount now. It's a German equatorial mount, computer-controlled go-to. So that's the reason why that got replaced, but the optics is still good. I have a few more telescopes now. So these are all my telescopes, in fact, if you don't count Effortsberg. So I have now 3 which have different focal lengths, slightly different apertures. So for deep sky imaging, I would probably use the short refractor here for its field of view. For the sun, I use a long refractor, which is ideal. It's built by Zeiss, so it's a very good instrument as well. Then next, after we have a telescope, we may want a camera. When I started all this, or in the early 80s, you can see, if you compare my drawing of Saturn, and this was taken on the same night on a negative film, there was just no way to get anywhere nearly as good as what you could see with the naked eye. This has changed, however. Since 2000, we have electronic cameras which are so much better. they make so much more use of every photon that comes. And so for the planets and the moon, you would take videos and then stack the video frames into single good quality images. So if you want a camera for this sort of purpose, for high resolution, bright objects, you can use. I still use the old webcam when I do this, or you can try and take videos with a digital SLR. The more recent models can all do this, or I'm sure Mark has a fancy video camera to take high frame rate data, or some others have those as well. At the other end of photography is a deep sky imaging, where you need long exposures. Perhaps, yes, you do not want quite so long focal lengths. But the change has been the same in the 80s. This is a Dumbbell Nebula on a negative film, and that was actually developed to 1600 ISO. And the camera here was also set to 1600 ISO, and you can see that today we just get so much better pictures, and the cameras can see so many things that we can never see, like the colors in the Dumbbell. Again, you might use a DSLR for this. Perhaps you have it modified to see more of the red line of H-alpha, of interstellar hydrogen, or a CCD camera, but then you need to add at least one filter, and you probably want to change the filter from red to green and blue and so on. Then the second two pictures, you may be able to see that the tracking was much better here. That's because I used an auto guider for this one. And then I switched it off and took a comparison shot. So that is actually another camera and a second telescope piggyback on your main one. So that's the cameras. Then I had a point shelter and mobility. Well, as it says, the best telescope is the one that's already set up. You just push away the roof and start observing. And I built this in the 80s, and then I went to university, and somebody else had to tear it all down. So I'm reluctant to do that again, at least until I know that I will never move ever again. But the opposite is also the case. The best telescope is the one you didn't leave at home, because if you go on holiday and you don't have a telescope, then you can't use it. So there are different applications for sticking your telescope in the car boot. While I was a student, of course, it was difficult in the flat to set it up and look in all directions. You might just want to drive a few miles to get dark skies. Again, you might want southern skies, like here in Spain. Or you might want to chase eclipses, although chances are you have to go on a plane, and then you have probably difficulties with this telescope to take with you. And then amongst the gadgets, as it were, you also need software. Everywhere we have software these days in our lives. In observing, we use software, planetarium software, to plan what we're going to doing, what is above the horizon. We use, as I said, the auto guide to properly track the stars during long exposures. Once we have taken the images, we reduce the data. We use dark and bias frames, flat frames, and we register and stack multiple frames. So the second two pictures here illustrate this. This is a single frame of 1 minute exposure, I believe, and this is 32 frames stacked. It makes quite a difference. Also, the satellite disappears in that process. But it doesn't really stop there. If we take the images to do some analysis, to measure positions, to measure brightness of stars, then we need software for that. Most people skip that aspect of things, but you definitely want to do improvement of how your images appear, because if you just take the image that I took there, the single frame, this is what it looks like. There are in fact a couple of stars visible. The most bright, the brightest ones. But essentially, the object you were looking for is completely invisible. You have to apply what we call a stretch. You have to increase the apparent brightness of the image so that you see anything. And then, as I said, yes, you have too much noise and you stack. For bright objects, there are also other things you might want to do. Unsharp masking to improve the detail on, say, lunar shots or on the sun or planets. And so we come to the observing bit, because that's what we actually are about, I think. Actually looking up at the sky and maybe logging down, writing down what there was to see. Now, usually we have the problem that it's cloudy. So what we can do then, we can still reduce the data from last time, or we can plan what we're going to do next time. The next problem we sometimes have is that it's daylight. Well, okay, if it's daylight, then have a look at the sun. The sun at the moment is not terribly interesting. In 2002 and probably 11 years after that, it was more interesting than it is now. But it will come back, I'm assured, by the BAA section director. Well, if it's night, it's probably moonlight, and we can't see anything else, anything other than the moon. So let's just observe the moon. You can record the phases. Yes, an almost full moon and a half moon. You can record the libration, which you can see here. Say Mare Crisium looks slightly more circular there than in this shot. This is because the aspect that we have of the moon slightly changes over the months. So two weeks later, we see. So this was taken earlier. 2 weeks later, we see Mare Crisium better, more face on. You can look for perigee, apogee effects. As if you look carefully, you can see that the near full moon is quite a bit bigger than the half moon. It's the same image scale, the same telescope, but the moon was closer at this time than here. And somebody made a list of 100 objects you can try and look for on the moon and tick off. Number 1 is very easy. Number 100 is terribly difficult, and you probably give up somewhere along the way. But it still can keep you busy for a few months or a year or two. The other problem we might have is everything is fine, dark night, clear, but we don't have a telescope. Well, we can still take some pictures because all it really needs is a camera and a lens, a wide field lens, to take some shots of constellations, maybe with some trees in the foreground, or even architecture. But finally, when we do have a clear, moonless, dark night and all the equipment is there and working, then we will do things like this. We look for deep sky objects and try to take probably color images of the most iconic ones, or the prettiest, or the ones we tried before and wanted to do a little bit better than last time. You need practice to do this. Everything has to be working and you need to know how it works. But you instantly, well, the next day you get a really nice picture. And if it's not so nice, then you'll try again next time and it will be better. So you become familiar with the equipment, with the procedure, with the software, and you will get better and better at it. And then perhaps the time comes that you can deploy all that expertise and take pictures of things that come and go, like comets. A comet you can see for a few weeks, or possibly only for a few days. Novae, supernovae, these are things that you can't make a repeat observations next year. So when they happen, then you want to see them at that time. Similarly, John spoke about noctilucent clouds. This was in July 2006. When they happen, then you drop everything else and take pictures of that. but taking these pictures is not quite so difficult. They're wide field shots, just a number of seconds, camera on a tripod. Similar for aurora, when it happens, then you want to be out there and take the pictures on that night. Eclipses, transits, conjunctions, these are more predictable, but you may want to prepare more carefully for those things. So that's already it. That was the observing bit. But then, okay, so this is a hobby for us. Mainly we want to have fun. We try something that we find interesting, then we get bored and we try something else. But we also take it seriously. I mean, it's a hobby. It's like football. It's more, well, I can't understand it, but people say it's more important than life. So if we take it seriously, then I think at least we should write down what we've been doing. This is a note I have from August 1975, when we went out into the countryside to look for this comet. And there's not much there in terms of notes, but I still know that I did it, and it reminds me perhaps of some of the circumstances of that. So write down when, what you observed, which objects, how, which telescope, what magnification, so on, and from where. And if you do this on the computer and you have a daily directory on your or folder on your computer, and you have images, then you can sort your images into that structure as well. But you can take it even more seriously. Say if you do the Lunar 100, or if you try to image or view, observe all the Messier objects, then that is quite a serious undertaking. Even more so if something you can do long term, or for as long as you find it fun, is counting sunspots, estimating variable stars. It's in a way, it sounds much more boring because you do the same thing all the time. But if you do it for a long time, then you do get results. These are my sunspot counts for the last 11 odd years. So in 2008, there was a minimum, and then the maximum of this solar cycle occurred in 2014. And now we may have just about had the next minimum, although you can't be too sure whether it goes down again. So this is something more serious. Takes longer, it's boring, but I find it more interesting, in fact, to have something. It's more something that you can show off, I think. And indeed, this is a picture from Wikipedia, and somewhere in here are my data, because I send my spot counts to the BAA, and I send them on to the international group of people who collect all this data, and then they end up in the common knowledge of humanity as to how many sunspots there were at what time. So if we take it that seriously, join an observing program, then we probably join the BAA for that, or the AAVSO if we're into variable stars. Or Mark has joined a project at Kent University, Horst, where he sends in images where they do photometry on. Perhaps less serious, less much expertise required is if you go into one of these Zooniverse projects to help the astronomers classify objects in very large data sets, or perhaps even less astronomical and your own doing is if you just lend your computer to objects like SETI at home, which has just ended, I think. But there are other projects like that which form a model of the Milky Way and things like that. So you could join those things, and if you dig into what they're doing, then you can also learn a lot from these things, I guess. So I think I have covered, well, I have not covered one thing, that is the astrosocs. And so instead of a summary, I've listed here what the astrosoc can do for us to help us with all these things. So in terms of knowledge, talks like this one, public engagement, we have an interest group for imaging. It has been known for ASE to hold courses, but that is quite a lot of effort, and there's not that much interest for it, probably. But a bigger society like the BAA might be doing these things, or the SPA, the Society for Popular Astronomy, they might be doing that quite well. With the tourism, the society can help with the organizing of travel. A number of years ago, we just car share to go to Kelly Castle, that sort of thing, or probably the BAA organizes expeditions to solar eclipses. Equipment, you don't necessarily have to buy a telescope first off. You can loan one from the ASE. Some astrosocs like Highland have observatories. And with our observing to help, yes, if the society has an observatory, you may be able to use that. We try to organize sometimes dark side sessions, but it's difficult to organize because of the weather, of course. But sometimes a couple of people meet somewhere in a lay-by in the dark countryside to do some observing. Projects and interest groups. The imaging group is currently the only one that ASE does. And if you want to get deeper into the science and observing projects, but that is perhaps more something for the bigger societies like the BAA. One thing to remember though, the astrosoc is exactly its members. There's nothing else. If the members don't do anything, then the society doesn't do anything. And you may think, oh, the council is supposed to do all these things. The council are just people who have agreed to be a little bit more active than others, but they are probably hoping that somebody else will step up and release them. So join up and join in your local astrosoc and maybe the BAA or SPA. And that's where my talk ends.
Thank you very much, Horst.
I'll go back to the start, maybe.
Okay. Any questions come through, Peter?
Yeah, we heard one about your webcam, Horst, from Mike McGovern. Carol, did you want to say any more?
Yes.
I was really just wondering which webcam.
Oh, you expect me to read it? Oh. So can you repeat?
Sorry, yeah, I was wondering which webcam it is that you use. I've got a webcam here as well that I modified myself years ago, but I've never really used it very much. And I think I probably will start to use it once Jupiter and Saturn become a bit more visible later in the year. I was wondering which one you had.
So the one I have is a Philips 2 UCAM, which I bought in 2002. So that's the sort of vintage of it.
Yeah. I think it might be the same one. Mine is the SPC 900NC. Does that sound about right?
Probably. If it's a Philips of that sort of generation, then yes, it is probably that. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's supposed to be one of the better ones, but I've never really used it properly. So I think I'll give it a go.
Yeah, if you have it, in general, I would say what you already have, give it a try, see what it can do. Yeah.
Can I just say one problem we'll have? A lot of those won't work under Windows 7 or Windows 10 because the drivers don't exist for them. They will work under Linux, but not everyone wants to use that. So it's quite a challenge for the older webcams.
Right. I was tempted to say it used to be very difficult to get a driver for Linux, and now all webcams just work on Linux. But I wasn't aware that on Windows it has gone the other way. But yes, you can. Yeah, that can be a trouble. Yeah.
Yes, the SPC webcams do still work on Windows, and they're a bit later than the TU cams, so they do actually work.
So I've got one as well, Horst, and what I use it for, I put it onto the polar scope.
Yes.
So that you don't have to bend down and look into the polar scope.
Yeah, that's a smart idea.
Yeah. So it's quite easy to modify.
I tried for a while to use it for an auto guider, but the exposures are too short and the sensitivity is then not good enough. Yeah.
So might bring along and let somebody see it.
Nigel's asking if that was Montserrat in Spain you were at.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. I wanted to observe the Mercury transit from there, this was a couple days before, but then all of Spain was under rain cloud, except one little hole in the clouds 100 kilometers further west. So I couldn't observe it from there, unfortunately. But I did manage to observe it.
Ian, are you there, Ian? Ian Smith? You're muted. You're muted, Ian.
There we go. Right. Yes, Horst, I noticed in your 1975 log that you gave the coordinates in J2000.
Yes, somebody spotted that, yes.
Were they in use then, or have you just updated?
No, no, indeed, that is very well observed. In those days, one would have used Bessel 1950 coordinates. What has happened to the logs is this would have been in a scrapbook initially handwritten with a pen, but it has been. I reorganized after a couple of years and retyped everything and resorted it from chronological into per object. And in another complete revision of the lot, you may also have noticed that it was in English. That was certainly not the case in 1975. I didn't have that much foresight to write them in English at that time. So when it was computerized, it all got changed, and for the deep sky objects, for the stars and so on, the coordinates I added to the database, yes, they are then J2000 coordinates, because by that time they were in use. Yeah.
Jim N has gone a bit philosophical. Do you want to actually talk to us, Jim?
Not really. I was just, I just was struck when Horst said about learning science bail out when it stops making sense, and I think we could apply that more generally.
Yeah, good point. Yes. That's it.
Is that the questions? Well, Horst, thank you very much.
Okay.
I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I'll give you, can I give you a very personal thank you? When I joined the society and bought my first telescope after I'd retired, Horst was the person who, more than anybody else, came out to observe when we were using Kusland before they turned the lights back on. And thanks to Horst, I found my way around the night sky, and he helped me with my first images, and came back and kept encouraging me. So thank you, Horst. I owe you a big debt.
Okay, good.
Thank you very much. Okay, if you want, can I start sharing my screen now?
Yes, please do. Yeah. Okay. We have lots of thank yous on the YouTube as well, Horst.
Great. Let me find the talk. Okay, present. Now, hopefully you can see the first slide. It's really what I started to say at the beginning. This is what we're trying to do. The opportunity is to look at one another's equipment and experiences, find out the experiences. Only need be 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be just scopes, mounts, anything, filters, whatever you think would be interesting to share. Okay, the first thing I'm going to talk about is my first telescope, which was a Meade. And there it is. It's the Meade 8-inch Schmidt Cassegrain. Almost a 2 meter, just over a 2 meter focal length, f10. Good optics. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the optics on this. It had a built-in GPS and what they called Eclipse CCD wide field camera. This was to allow it to align. It looked at the sky and aligned itself, in theory. It's controlled by the AutoStar 3 hand controller with supposedly 100,000 objects in it. It also comes with a very annoying voice, if you want to listen to it, called the Astronomer Inside. And it also provided visual descriptions via a 4-inch screen. There's no dew shield on this, so you wrap around an external dew shield, and it certainly needed it on cold nights. So there's the view from the back. As it's a single arm. The camera is underneath, and there's the 4-inch screen in daytime mode. You could turn it to nighttime mode, and the connectors all fitted into that to the arm at the side. Quite robust. I could hang my DSLR on the back, which weighs nearly 1 kilo, and it didn't cause any problems. So there on the top is the, let's find the pointer. There's the GPS unit and the red dot finder. So a bit of history. And what do I think about this scope? I bought a 6-inch originally, which failed to auto align. I sent it back to Rother Valley, and they said it needs to go back to the States, which was a disappointment. It was made up for by the fact they gave me an 8-inch scope to replace it. And I said, I like this, can I keep it? And they agreed. To set it up, it had 3 modes, auto mode, 2-star and 1-star. If you put it in the auto mode, the GPS sorted out the date, the time and location. It searched for alignment stars and tried to identify these with the CCD camera. But just like the 6-inch, it nearly always got it wrong and went about 20 degrees further in right ascension than it needed to. If I did listen to this chap's voice, he'd often tell me that he cannot find the said star, and maybe there's trees or a building in the way. I'm going, no, just move a bit to the left and you can see it. Anyway, it tried to find another star. Didn't always fail, but probably 50% of the time. So I abandoned auto mode and went to manual mode. 2-star alignment, it would pick 2 stars, which was fine, except my garden is a sunken garden and I have a house towering above me on the north. And if it wanted to choose a star in that direction, it told me the house was probably in the way. So I went to 1-star. This, you picked your own alignment star. So that solved that problem. Still gave me, the declination would be good, but it still gave me a right ascension error. But I could manually correct that, click it into view, and then it would work fine. So it was quick to set up. Alt azimuth, just make sure the tripod is level, and then it go through its setup routine as I've explained. It was great for visual observing, and I took images starting when I met Horst there. I think we took one with Horst camera to start with, because I'd forgotten my T-piece adapter. And I could take a 30-second exposure, and that was about the most that the alt azimuth could cope with without trailing too much. Once I bought my Infinity camera and the focal reducer, I could move into sort of EAA, which I've discussed before, and that provided a solution for deep sky objects. And I managed 30-second exposures with that, aligned, derotated and stacked, for a total of 10 minutes, which was, I think, incredibly good for an alt azimuth scope. In fact, the Mead engineer, who I had occasion to talk with now and again, had never heard of it. And I said, well, perfectly possible, I get perfectly good results. However, time moved on, and this year, what had been occasional firmware failures increased, and it had a total meltdown. The GPS couldn't find out where it was, didn't know what time it was. Manual intervention was allowed intermittently. It's not part of the normal routine. And if I could persuade it to tell it where it was and what time it was, it then wouldn't slew on my commands. So I bought a firmware update card from First Light Optics. It didn't solve the problems, so I gave up and reverted to plan B. So I liberated the tube. So there's the tube. It was held on by 4 Allen screws, and I only had to detach the lead for the camera, for the CCD camera. And then I was left with a perfectly good optical tube. The detail bar didn't come with bridge bars, so I made some. It now sits on my EQ6 mount, and I've made some adjustments from my first trial, so I'm now awaiting another dark night, and we'll see how it goes. So that's the Meade. Can I recommend them? Optically, very good. I have no faith in the electronics. There seems to be quite a few failures, which all require firmware failures, all require to be sent back to the States to be dealt with. I think they've filed to protect themselves from bankruptcy at the moment. I think there's some ongoing court cases around areas like price fixing and copyright, I think, but it's in the press. You pays your money and makes your choice. All I can say is optically, they're fine, and leave it at that. Any questions on that scope?
I was just, hang on. I was just going to make one quick comment. I think the GPS probably failed because of this rollover problem earlier in the year. I've got a Celestron GPS 8, and I had to actually update the firmware to get it to work. But it was a problem with a lot of GPSs at that time. But I think the GPS system itself rolled over its 1,030 24 days or something stupid, and a lot of GPSs couldn't actually then understand what to do with the information they've got.
Right. Well, you may well be right, John. I mean, it wasn't the first failure, as I said.
No.
It was an ongoing problem that kept coming and going, and I did get a new firmware update, but they do say in the literature, if you upgrade the firmware, it's not guaranteed to work, and if it fails, you'll probably have to send it back to the States.
Right. There's no agent over here anymore, isn't there? The last guy who used to do it for BCNF down in Tunbridge Way, I think gave up.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, he set himself his own business, didn't he? And then
yes.
I think he's given up now. Yeah.
Nigel, Neil was asking if there's any active groups in the country who have the telescope.
I used to look on some of the Cloudy Nights forums, etc. The comments sounded very familiar, so I didn't join any of the specific groups, but I plugged into those a few times. But I mean, I'm not unhappy in the sense that I'm disappointed it's failed, but I essentially will have an 8-inch tube sat on a mount, which is more versatile than what it was on. Although it does take me to set it up. Okay.
What weight is the tube, Andrew?
I can't remember the weight. They're light. They're very light. You've got the mirror. You've got the lens at the front, but I think it's about a couple of kilos. It's not.
Yeah.
They're very light.
Yeah.
That
I
looks
think
like
mine
a-
is about 5 kilo. Yeah.
Oh, I may be wrong by, it might be 2.5 or 3, but it is, compared to the other kit, it's of no consequence.
Is that an extension bar for your weights? You've got one there.
Yes. Yeah, I'll talk about the mount in a minute. Okay, let me move on. And I'll talk about my my next scope, which is the Explore Scientific 127. Now, I got this secondhand. Somebody got in touch with the society and said, due to a death in the family, they had this scope and the mount and some equipment for sale. Mark came to me and said that they wanted us to ask around, and I felt myself in a difficult position because he told me, and I thought I'd like that. So to play fair, I wrote down my bid and waited until we told everybody in the society. Nobody came forward, so I passed on my bid to the family, and they accepted it. I'm happy to say. So the tube is an excellent tube. It's almost a meter focal length, f7.5. It weighs 9.5 kilos, so it's quite chunky. Has a good 10:1 focal reducer, high quality lens, and a built-in dew shield. It came with the mount as well. So it's a Skywatcher EQ6 Pro. It weighs 16 kilos, excluding the counterweights. It can handle just over 18. I have two 5.1 counterweights. The tripod weighs 7.5 kilos. So I get a workout every time I set this up and take it down. Margaret asked me why it takes me so long. I don't tell her it's because I'm getting old. I just say it's complicated. These are, I think, mounts are pretty standard workhorses for amateurs these days. Very versatile, dual dovetails. You get a SynScan hand controller. It only boasts half the number of objects that the Meade does, but this one seems to find them. You've got a RS-232 for computer control, autoguide socket, and polar scope. Very, very stable mount, given its weight, that's not surprising, and very versatile. It came with a case and some outstanding eyepieces. The 2-inch 40mm and 20mm 68-degree eyepieces are wonderful. There's a 1.25 16mm as well, 68-degree. They're not cheap, but having used the standard sort of 1.25 eyepieces and these, I must say there's no comparison. Although, again, quite weighty pieces of equipment. I did buy a finder scope, which just helps in the setup. Although the more I get used to setting the mount up, the less I need the finder scope for. So now these are it in operation. Now I use counterseal connected to the mount. I have my Attic Infinity camera, which is here, or my Nikon, here's shooting the moon, and I've got a box with I guess what is a 12-volt motorcycle battery in it now, which powers up the camera and the mount, and will do for hours and hours and hours before it needs recharging. And I think that's M1 I'm capturing. As I say, I tend to look at these things as electronically aided astronomical aids. So I like to look at these sky objects. I can see them as they're being downloaded, as it stacks, derotates the image. I can even stretch the image on the stretchers at the bottom. So the image I get at the end and I save as a sort of add-on rather than the primary goal. I do get lots of wires though. I have replaced a joystick, which was rather cumbersome with this games controller. But there's the camera that I was testing, the laptop running the Cat Seal and the Infinity software. You've got power supplies. So I've not been tempted to go wireless. This works, so I'll stick with it. And it's a good combination for me. So these are some of the images I've taken with the DSLR or the Attic. As I said, lots of weightlifting, but worth the effort. So that's the ES127 and the mount. I'll take any questions on those.
Hello. Can I just say that the EQ6 interface is not RS-232, it's TTL, and that if you plug it directly into the computer's RS-232, you could potentially damage it. So it's the handset.
I stand corrected, Ian. It's a 232 plug, I suppose, and socket rather than interface.
Yes.
Sorry, yes.
The handset that performs the function of converting TTL to RS-232.
Right.
Just in case anybody's listening.
Yeah, fair point. Okay.
Andrew, it's Sean here.
Yes, Sean.
One very silly question.
No silly questions, Sean.
You spoke about recharging the battery. Is it an actual car battery you use? And if so, how do you recharge it?
It's effectively a motorbike battery in size-wise, 12 volts, and I recharge it with a car battery charger.
Ah, okay.
About once a month.
How many hours would you approximately get out of it then, would you think, if it's...
I would think you'd get... I've never worked it out. When I've charged it, it's always been about 3/4 full. And I've probably had 8, 10 hours. And rather than trailing mains leads across the garden, it's easier. And obviously, if I take the kit away, I just use that as well.
Great, thanks.
No problem. Okay, let me just very quickly finish off. Oh, start again. Go to the beginning. Right, finally, I'm lucky. I also have a travel scope. I bought one from Rother Valley, so it's a branded Rother Valley refractor, 500mm 5.5, and makes a very reasonable travel scope. So there it is, as a foot roller underneath, with and without the dew shield extended. So it's quite compact, 42 centimeters, with it closed, 50 if it's open. Dual speed focuser is quite good to operate. It'll take a 2-inch or 1.25 eyepieces, and you can pop a red dot finder on the top, or I do anyway, and only weighs 3 kilos. And I've put that, it came with I think an EQ2 mount, and which are pretty flimsy to say the least. So I chose the Ioptron Smart EQ Pro. I think it's the same one Peter Black has. And yep. Having seen it in operation, I thought, that's a good one. As you can see in the case, good old Maplin's box, it's only about a foot square and fits nicely. And I also bought a couple of solar filters because this lends itself very readily to some solar observing. So if I put the two together, that's what it looks like. Quite easy to use, easy to set up, and for a travel scope, more than adequate. The grab and go equatorial mount takes a 5K payload. It only weighs 2.8 kilos. Its 8 AA batteries claim it gives 16 hours consecutive tracking. You can, it says, use Captacil and ASCOM, etc. to control it. I've not tried. There is a AC DC adapter. It claims 50,000 objects. But I guess it's an ASCOM controller and ST guiding port. It quotes for observational and wide field imaging. I've not tried to image seriously with this. I may do, because the extension tubes I've got on my Explore Scientific will fit this. So I may try with the DSLR. That's another shot of it, and the battery box is one on either side. And using the app similar to the SynScan, the Ioptron will show you where the pole star needs to be on any particular night, any particular location. So these are quite useful apps to have in both cases. So what can I say about it? It's light, compact, it's fairly easy to set up. I mean, all equatorial mounts do take some setting up. It's accurate. Once you've set it up, it will find what you want in the sky. The cons are it's obviously quite a light mount, won't take a lot of weight. It's fine for observational work. As I say, not really an imaging scope, but it's only 90 millimeters. Don't expect great performance when you're looking at deep sky objects, but you can get reasonable views. Certainly of the planets. I had some great views of Saturn last year, as I towed it around, and yeah, good fun, really good fun. So just get in touch if you want to talk about your scopes. I'll stop there, and if you've got any more questions, let me know. I'll stop sharing. Okay. Any questions?
Horst confirmed that his Celestron 8 is 6.4 kilograms.
Right. I will say that even the EQ6 Pro isn't without some of its issues. Here is the motherboard, which I had to replace. So, you know, even the best fail, but £100 and a fairly easy replacement at home put that one right.
I think you're very unlucky with that, Andrew, because the EQ6s are, I mean, they're really rough, solid engineering, and they're not fine in any way, but for the money you pay for them, they are incredibly good and very reliable. Yeah.
And I mean, the weight is a reassurance, isn't it? That it's not going anywhere even on a breezy night. It's just, say, by the time I put it all out, spent a few hours out there and then carried it all back into the garage again or the house. I feel I've had a workout.
I had an EQ6 which I foolishly damaged myself, but I replaced it with an EQ6R, which is the current version of it. And the only real difference is it's got a bigger weight load. You can take about 20 kilograms of telescopes, but it's also got belt drives built in, which you can do to the old EQ6s. But it has a built-in belt drive which removes some of the errors in guiding and things like that. But fundamentally, it's still the same telescope and still as good. Little bit better, not a huge amount better, but a little bit better.
Well, I mean, the difference would no doubt show for a hardcore imager, but for somebody like me, mine's fine.
No, it wouldn't actually. It doesn't make that much difference to it at all, to be honest.
Okay. Anybody, anything else they want to raise? As I say, we've got quite a full program going forward. Anything from you, Mark?
Yeah, one last thing. I've been asking people if they could subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're now on 93 subscribers. I'd like to get to 100 if possible, so that we can actually give our channel a proper URL instead of some strange long string. So if 7 more people can subscribe to the channel, that would be great, please.
I've been encouraging some people.
Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much. Probably see you next Wednesday. Cheers.
No, that's very good.
Bye.